Your brother needs it more than you do. He has a family to feed. You're single. You have your salary, you'll be fine. My mother said it the way she always said things that weren't fine at all, with complete calm, like she was reading a weather report. I was standing in the kitchen of my childhood home, still in my coat, still holding the overnight bag I'd driven 4 hours to bring because she said she needed help sorting through some paperwork. The coffee I hadn't touched yet was going cold on the counter. My phone was still in my hand from when I'd checked my account balance in the driveway, a habit, just a quick check before I walked in. What I saw had stopped me cold before I even reached the front step. $3.2 million. Gone. Not a glitch. Not a pending transaction. Gone. With a transfer timestamp from 2 days ago. While I was presenting a product roadmap to 40 people in a conference room in Austin and had no idea my mother was in a bank downtown with a document I hadn't thought about in years. I set my phone face down on the counter. I didn't trust what my face was doing. She was still talking. Something about how hard my brother's wife had it, how their youngest needed a specialist, how a mother has to do what a mother has to do. The words floated past me like they were coming through water. I watched her hands wrap around her own coffee mug. Steady hands. The hands of someone who had made a decision and felt good about it. "Mom," I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "That was my money." She blinked at me over the rim of her mug. It was the family account, Nora. It was a custodial account that transferred fully into my name on my 25th birthday. I have the documentation. The bank has the documentation. You were removed as a cosigner 3 years ago. Her expression flickered. Just for a second. The bank didn't say anything. Because you went to a branch manager who didn't pull the full account history. Because you brought a document that was 3 years out of date and no one caught it in time. I picked up my phone, turned it back over, looked at her. But I already did. She opened her mouth. Then the doorbell rang. My mother frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Neither was she expecting what was on the other side of that door, a woman in a gray blazer holding a folder, with a second person standing slightly behind her. "Mrs. Callahan?" the woman asked. "I'm with the Fraud Resolution Unit at First Central Trust. We spoke on the phone this morning." She glanced at me. "And you must be Miss Callahan. We've been waiting to reach you directly." My mother turned back to look at me. The color had begun to drain from her face. I hadn't driven 4 hours to have a conversation. I had driven 4 hours to finish one. I should explain something about the account, because the most common question I know people have is exactly the one my mother gambled on. How does something like this even happen? How does a parent access an adult child's money? The answer is that it happens slowly and then all at once. My grandparents on my father's side set up a custodial account for me when I was 7. My mother was listed as co-manager because my father passed away when I was 9 and someone had to be responsible. I grew up knowing it existed. I grew up understanding it was mine for when I needed it for a house, for a business, for something that mattered. When I turned 25, the account legally and fully became mine alone. My mother's access was supposed to expire automatically. Supposed to. There was a gap in the bank system, a clerical flag that hadn't been updated when the custodial terms transferred. Her name still appeared in one legacy field, that a branch manager, working quickly, didn't cross-reference against the primary account ownership record. She walked in with a notarized letter of direction she had drafted herself. She told them it was for a family real estate matter. She transferred $3.2 million to an account in my brother's name in under 20 minutes. She had been planning it for months. I know this now because I found the draft letter on a shared family Google Drive that she forgot I had access to, timestamped 11 weeks before she actually did it. 11 weeks. She had thought about this, revised it, and gone through with it while calling me every Sunday and asking how work was going. I found the draft on a Tuesday night. By Thursday morning, I had already spoken to my attorney. I want to be clear about something. I did not act out of rage. I had felt rage. Yes, alone in my apartment in Austin at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, reading a document my mother had written about how to reroute my inheritance to my brother, feeling the specific cold of being reduced to a problem to be managed. I felt that. I let myself feel it for about 20 minutes. Then I made a list. Attorneys, contacted by Thursday. Bank fraud unit, notified by Friday. Account flagged for unauthorized transfer, done before the weekend. By the time I drove to my mother's house, I had already filed the paperwork. The fraud resolution team had already begun their review. I had a full paper trail account statements, the original custodial terms, the legal record of my 25th birthday transfer, and a forensic accountant's preliminary note confirming the transfer authorization was invalid. The only thing left was to look her in the eye. The woman from the fraud unit was professional and brief. She explained to my mother that the account transfer was under formal review, that the receiving account, my brother's, had been flagged and temporarily restricted, and that my mother would need to make herself available for follow-up. She handed her a document. My mother's hands, for the first time I could remember, were not steady. After they left, my mother sat down at the kitchen table. "You did this before you even got here," she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. "Then, you're going to destroy this family." I picked up my cold coffee and poured it down the sink. "You did that part yourself." I drove back to my hotel. I had not planned to stay in that house and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't sad. I was something in between that doesn't have a clean name. The particular feeling of being completely right about something you wish you were wrong about. My brother called at 9:47 that night. "Nora." His voice was tense, tight in the way of someone trying to stay controlled. "Mom called me." "What did you do?" "My account is locked. I can't access anything. My mortgage payment is supposed to go out next week." "Then you should have thought about that before you accepted $3.2 million that wasn't yours." I didn't know it was wrong." "She told me it was a gift. From the family. Was it in my name?" Silence. "Daniel." I kept my voice level. "Was my name on the transfer documentation she showed you?" A longer silence. "Nora, come on. I'm going to need you to say it." "Yeah," he said finally, low and deflated. "Yeah, your name was on it. Then you knew." I let that land. "I'm not angry at you the same way I'm angry at her. But you accepted it. You deposited it. You didn't call me, and that makes you part of this. What do I have to do to fix it? Transfer it back. All of it. By the end of the week. If you do that, the bank and I can discuss whether this stays a civil matter or becomes something else." I paused. "If you don't, I move forward, and the forensic trail shows you knowingly received fraudulently transferred funds. That's not a family argument anymore. That's a federal question." He started to say something. I could hear it forming, some version of "please," or "you're being dramatic," or "think about mom," and I said, "I love you, Daniel." "I do. But I spent 3 years building that balance. I worked nights. I invested carefully. I missed vacations and I drove a used car, and I did it alone, without anyone's help, without anyone's interest. And then mom took it in 20 minutes to give it to you because she decided you needed it more. And neither of you called me first." He didn't say anything after that. "End of the week," I said. And I ended the call. I ordered room service. I ate in bed and watched something forgettable on television, and I slept better than I had in months, because there is a particular rest that comes from having already done the hard thing before the hard thing finds you. The next morning, I drove to the bank branch where the transfer had been processed. I asked to speak to the branch manager. She was expecting me. The fraud unit had already been in contact, and she was appropriately uncomfortable. I sat across from her in a glass-walled office and walked her through the account documentation piece by piece. The original custodial terms. The age of majority transfer record. The updated sole owner designation from 3 years prior. The gap in the legacy fielder system had never corrected. She apologized. She used the word oversight 4 times. I said, "I'm not here for an apology. I'm here to make sure the record is corrected today, that your compliance team files the appropriate incident report, and that I receive written confirmation of the account status by end of business." She wrote everything down. I was back in my car by 10:15. My mother called twice that day. I let it go to voicemail both times. The first message was controlled. She wanted to talk. She wanted me to understand her perspective. She felt she had made the best decision for the family. The second message was less controlled. She cried. She said I was punishing her for loving my brother. She said my father would be ashamed of me. I sat in a parking lot and listened to both messages in full. And then I did something I had been taught my whole life not to do. I chose myself. I called my attorney and confirmed we were proceeding. My brother sent the transfer back on Thursday. All of it, down to the cent, moved back into my account by 3 in the afternoon. He didn't include a note. I didn't need one. I confirmed receipt, notified my attorney, and asked the bank's fraud unit to close the active review given the full restitution. They marked it resolved. They also filed an internal compliance report about the legacy access gap, which meant other accounts with the same issue would be audited and corrected. Somewhere out there, other people's money just got a little safer. I didn't plan that part, but I wasn't unhappy about it. My mother sent a text that evening. Just 3 words, "Are we okay?" I put my phone in my bag and went for a run. There's a version of this story where I would have let it go. I want to be honest about that. For years, I almost did. I watched my mother redirect resources my father had built toward my brother without comment. I watched her treat his choices as priorities and mine as hobbies. When I got my first major promotion, she said, "That's nice, but Daniel is really struggling right now." When I bought my apartment, she said, Good. But your brother's rent just went up." I was the responsible one, which meant I was the invisible one. The one who didn't need anything because she always figured it out. I figured out a lot of things alone, including this. I did not have a law degree, but I had spent enough time around legal documents in my work, in building my own financial life to know exactly how custodial accounts worked, how authority expired, and what documentation meant. I had kept copies of everything because I had learned, slowly and without drama, that in my family the person who kept records was the person who kept what was theirs. I thought about my grandmother when I sat across from that bank manager. My grandmother, who pressed a hand over mine the week before she died and said, "That money is for you, Nora. Not for anyone else. Promise me you'll remember that." I had promised. I had also photographed the account paperwork she kept in a fireproof box and stored the images in 3 separate secure locations. I had learned that too, from her. 2 weeks after the transfer came back, my company hosted its annual leadership summit in Chicago. I had been asked 6 months earlier to give a keynote address, not a panel, not a breakout session, a keynote about navigating high-stakes decisions and staying grounded when systems fail you. 400 people in a hotel ballroom. The kind of room I used to dream about from the back seat of my mother's minivan. I took the stage at 9 in the morning. I wore a dress I had bought for the occasion. I was not nervous. I had been preparing for this for a long time, and not just the speech. I talked about what it means to trust a system that wasn't built with you in mind, about learning to read documents that other people assume you don't understand, about the specific discipline of staying quiet when you are furious, staying methodical when you are grieving, staying patient when every instinct says to burn the whole thing down. I did not mention my mother by name. I didn't need to. The story was there in the structure of what I said. Halfway through, I looked out at the audience and saw my manager in the 3rd row, nodding. I saw 3 women I mentored sitting together near the back. I saw people I had never met writing things down. At the end, the room stood up. Not politely. Actually stood up, the way people do when something has landed somewhere real. I walked off stage, and my phone had 17 new messages. Colleagues. A former professor. My aunt in Portland, my father's sister. The only person in my extended family who had ever treated my work as something worth taking seriously, who had somehow gotten a live stream link and watched the whole thing from her living room. Her message said, "Your father would have been so proud, he couldn't have stayed in his seat. I love you." I stood in the corridor behind the stage and read that twice. My eyes went hot. I blinked it away and breathed and put my phone in my pocket. My mother texted again that night. She had heard about the keynote from someone. I don't know who. She wrote, "I saw you're speaking at a big conference. That's wonderful. Can we please talk?" I didn't answer that night. But I want to be fair to the truth of this, which is complicated. My mother is not a monster. She is a woman who lost her husband young, who raised 2 children without the map she thought she'd have, who spent 30 years managing scarcity even when it wasn't there anymore because scarcity had become her native language. She looked at her son's struggling family, and she looked at her daughter's savings, and she did the math the only way she knew how to do it, which was the wrong way. Which was the way that made her the center of a decision that wasn't hers to make. I understand that. I have tried to understand it for years. But understanding something is not the same as allowing it, and I had allowed it long enough. I called her on a Sunday, 3 weeks later. Sunday was always our day. She picked up on the first ring, which meant she had been waiting. Nora, her voice was careful. Mom. I sat on my couch with a cup of coffee and watched the morning light move across my apartment wall. The apartment I had furnished slowly, piece by piece, from my own earnings. The apartment she once called very small for what you make. I owe you an apology, she said. She said it carefully, the way she might step onto ice she wasn't sure would hold. What I did was wrong. I see that now. I let the silence be what it was for a moment. I know you were trying to take care of him, I said. I know that's what it felt like to you. I didn't think. You didn't ask. I said it gently. But I said it. That's the part that I keep coming back to, Mom. You didn't ask. You didn't call me and say, Daniel needs help, can we talk? You made a plan and executed it, and then handed me a cup of coffee in your kitchen like nothing happened. You erased 3 years of my work, like it was a line item you could just move around. She was quiet. I'm not asking you to be perfect, I continued. I'm not. But I need you to understand that when you make decisions about my life without including me, you're not protecting the family. You're just deciding I don't count as part of it. A long silence. And then, so quietly I almost missed it. I think I've been doing that for a long time. I had not expected that. Not the admission, not the stillness in her voice when she said it. I held the phone and didn't say anything. Your father saw it in you, she said. How strong you were going to be. I think I was always a little scared of it. A pause. That's not an excuse. No, I said. It's not. We talked for another hour. It wasn't a resolution. I don't believe in tidy resolutions, the kind where everything is forgiven and the table is set and everyone goes back to who they were before. That's not what happened. What happened was a beginning of something more honest. A first, careful conversation where neither of us pretended the other one was fine. It was more than I'd had in years. Daniel called the following week. He was awkward in the way that decent people are when they have done something they know is wrong and have to stand in the room with it. He apologized without qualifications, which I respected. He said he had opened a college savings account for his kids using money he and his wife had set aside themselves. He sounded tired and more real than he had in a long time. I should have called you, he said. When she told me what she was doing. I should have called you immediately. Yeah, I said. You should have. I was scared she'd change her mind. I almost laughed. I know. We didn't solve everything either. But I agreed to come to his daughter's birthday in the spring, and he said he'd send me the details. Small things. The size that fits in a hand. The fraud unit closed their review. The bank corrected the legacy system gap across over 2,000 accounts with similar clerical issues. I received a letter confirming the outcome, which I filed in the same fireproof box where I keep everything important. My account, restored and whole, sat exactly where it belonged. I didn't celebrate with anything extravagant. I took a long weekend in the Smoky Mountains, just me and a rental cabin and a stack of books I had been meaning to read for 2 years. I hiked trails that were empty in November. I sat on a porch in the cold air with coffee and watched fog move through the trees the way it does when the whole world is breathing slowly. On the last morning, I woke up early and sat outside before the sun was fully up. The mountains were dark shapes against a sky just beginning to go gray, and then rose and then gold. I thought about my grandmother pressing her hand over mine. I thought about my father, who I barely remember except in flashes his laugh, the way he called me his serious girl like it was a compliment, which it was. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, careful and silent, and folding herself small around a table where she had never fully been invited. I thought about the woman who sat in a bank manager's office with documentation in a manila folder and said, plainly and without apology, "This is mine, and I need you to correct the record." I didn't become that woman because of what my mother did. She was already there, built from years of early mornings and late nights and learning things no one offered to teach me. But I had spent a long time letting other people's comfort determine how much space I was allowed to take up. I had practiced being the one who was fine, who didn't need anything, who could be safely overlooked. I was done practicing that. My phone buzzed. A message from a woman who had seen the keynote video, which had apparently been shared widely enough to reach people I had never met. She was 32, she wrote. She was going through something similar with her family. She wanted to know how I had known when to stop being quiet. I read the message twice. The fog was thinning through the trees. The sky was all the way gold now. I typed back when the cost of staying quiet became higher than the cost of speaking up. When I realized that the people who wanted me silent were not protecting me. They were protecting themselves from having to see me clearly. She replied with just, "Thank you." I put my phone down and finished my coffee and watched the mountains come into full daylight, solid and unchanged by anything that had happened in the valleys below them. I had 4 hours of driving ahead and a week of work waiting and a life that was, in all the ways that mattered, entirely my own. I wasn't invisible. I never had been. I had just been waiting for the right moment to make that undeniable. That moment had come. I had made it come. And when I walked back inside to pack my bag, I noticed I was smiling. Not for anyone. Not for an audience, just the quiet, private smile of a woman who did the hard thing and lived on the other side of it, taller than when she started. They thought my silence was weakness. It was preparation. And now they knew the difference.